Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 35 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You can follow him on you've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing tonight?
I think we all know how we're both doing with the Eagles clinching the playoffs on Sunday, and that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm happy to be a fan of a playoff football team for the fourth time in the last 5 years.
It does feel nice, doesn't it? A long time ago, that 2-5 start seems a long time in the rearview mirror now, but we've got a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to review every Week 17 game. We're going to celebrate the Eagles clinching a playoff spot. But before we get to that, this podcast is out live on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, so drop us a comment if you're watching live. We'd love to interact with you guys. It also goes out to Apple Podcasts, so please give us a 5-star rating and a review. And let's dive into it, Mark. So the Eagles, in the 1 o'clock slate, they get the win over Washington, and then the dominoes fall into place later in the day. That means that is a playoff clinching spot. So your Philadelphia Eagles are going to the playoff, as you mentioned, for the fourth time in 5 years with two different head coaches. And it feels good. But let's zoom in on this game, and let's talk about specifically this game. Where do you want to start with this one?
I think, I feel like I've said this so many times on all of our review shows that we've been able to do. It all starts with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. I actually thought, I think a lot of the time in this win streak, we've kind of said, oh, a mixed bag for Jalen Hurts, positives and negatives. I've always said I wish he was better or worse. But then with Sirianni over that stretch of time, we've been fully supportive and thinking he's been just almost 100% positive over this last stretch of time. I actually thought that if you're saying like who had the better day between Hurts and Sirianni, I thought Hurts was great. He played mistake-free football, which is really the most important thing that he can do, is to not turn the ball over and to provide in the passing and the rushing game what he's able to do for the rushing game. We've seen, obviously, he's opened things up for the running backs. In this game, the running backs weren't as productive, but he was able to be productive with his legs, and that was very important. So, but then you look at Sirianni. I actually thought that Sirianni really, really messed up the end of that first half, and I thought that was going to be really costly. We ended up overcoming that, obviously. Washington did not score in the second half of this game. But the fact that we didn't go for it on fourth down in Washington's territory with a little more than 2 minutes left, we punted the ball. And then the fact that we called the timeout for them when they were clearly allowing us to let them go to the half up 13-7. And then they get down the field. We ice the kicker. He misses it. And then he goes out there and he makes another one. I really thought he bungled the end of that first half. But besides that, it was a near perfect game from Hurts and Sirianni.
Yeah, on the clock management stuff, it just didn't make sense to me that the Eagles' first two drives, you're in field goal range, and you opted not to take the points on fourth down and to go for it. And one time it results in a turnover on downs, one time it's a touchdown. I mean, so you net, plus 1 point there. But it didn't make any sense to be so aggressive and then with 2 minutes left to punt the ball. That just didn't mesh for me. And then, yeah, obviously that timeout came back to bite them, and it's a timeout they never should have called. But overall, I said on the post-game show that I thought this was probably Hurts' best game as a passer in the NFL. And he played a really good game. You look at the formula that has got the Eagles this far is a strong rushing attack, not asking Hurts to do a lot through the air. Well, against Washington, the running backs averaged 2.7 yards per carry. And Hurts found a way to get it done. And I thought he played really, really well. I thought he missed like one throw, really, that I tweeted out. He had a wheel route with Quez Watkins with a linebacker on him, and he left it short. And I tweeted that one clip out, and of course that blew up. Everybody was like, "Oh, you blah blah blah." I was like, "Well, I mean, I also said Hurts played the best game of his career, but overall, I mean, I thought he played really well. Really encouraged by what I saw from him and from the offense. And the offense really struggled a little bit early on. I thought that they tried to come in and do a lot of inside zone type runs, a lot of heavy personnel, and it just wasn't working against Washington's strong interior. And so you started to see more outside runs. And that was an adjustment that I really liked from them. We've asked the question, what happens when the Eagles can't run the ball? But we saw a game where they really struggled to run the ball, and we saw Hurts able to work in that context. And granted, it's against Washington, but it's all we have right now. And so it gives you hope that he's going to be able to go into a playoff game and do something similar.
For sure. I absolutely thought it was one of the more encouraging games that Jalen Hurts has played this year, if not including last year in his career in the NFL. So it's one of those games where he's looked pretty good against Washington both times. So, I don't want to get too crazy. Washington has one of the worst secondaries in the league, but he took what the defense gave him, and that's all we can ask him to do. And that's all he needs to do when you have the ability he does to extend plays in the pocket. And you have receivers like Devontae Smith who can improv and make things happen when Hurts makes things happen in the pocket. And when you're obviously able to add to the rushing game like he's able to, all you need to do is take what the defense gives you in the short and intermediate routes, in the middle of the field, on both sides of the field. And he's not throwing to one side. He's not only going to one side anymore. He's not only throwing, short. He really does seem like he's opened up the playbook a little bit in terms of what he's able to do as a passer, at least in that game.
Yeah, the only thing I would be slightly concerned about offensively is Washington played a ton of too high safety looks, which should be an advantageous look to run the ball. And the Eagles really struggled in that regard. Now, not every team has the defensive front Washington has, but there's some teams in the playoffs that are going to have really good defensive fronts. Now, Washington didn't have the secondary behind it to be able to cover the pass, but other teams, I'm afraid, will. And so that's something to keep an eye on. If you go against a team that can do the too high safety and still slow down the Eagles running game, I think it could cause some problems. But, you just have to wait and see what happens there. But overall, encouraging performance from the offense. We've got to talk about the Eagles' slow starts, though. The Eagles in the last 5 weeks they've started every game slow. They've come out, I'm not going to say necessarily they've come out flat. In this game, they drove down the field their opening drive, and then they had a turnover on downs. So if you kick the field goal there and you've got 10 points after your first 2 drives, maybe you don't consider that a slow start. But the defense couldn't get a stop. The offense only put up 7 points in the first half, and you go into half trailing 16-7. In the last 5 weeks, the Eagles have trailed 35-7 in first quarter scoring. That's not good. Now, they've outscored their opponents 114-39 after that, but that can't be a trend that continues, because you're not going to be able to do that to a Tampa Bay or to a Dallas or to a Green Bay. I don't know what the answer is, but this team's got to figure out how to start fast. I love the adjustments that I see Sirianni and Gannon make in game. Let's just start the game with those. It seems like the first half we phone it in every week, and then we make these incredible adjustments at halftime.
Yeah, I tweeted out during the game that the Eagles refused to stop starting slow, and I refuse to stop getting nervous about it. Every time I tweet like it's doomsday and like the game's over, and everyone yells at me for giving up early, and then I'm wrong every time. So, but I completely agree. That's not something that you can do against these good teams. You can't do that against Tom Brady. You can't do that against Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. You can't do that against Aaron Rodgers. You can't do that against the Dallas Cowboys. So,
Taylor Heineke opened the game 11 of 11, and Washington's up 16-7. He looked like Joe Montana out there. And then in the second half, you clamp him down, you shut him out.
I was listening to an unnamed Philadelphia radio station, and that I won't give any love to, but someone called in and they're like, "Yeah, I'd actually be nervous if the Eagles start out a game fast, and they need to keep starting slow and keep that dog mentality that Sirianni's talking about, and they just keep making adjustments." And I'm like, yeah, I'll take a lead in the first quarter. I can't deal with these first quarter slow starts, and I do really think that would do them in the playoffs, and hopefully that is something they can get fixed. It's funny, like a lot of young coaches, especially young offensive coaches, are really good on their first drive, and it hasn't really been that way for Sirianni.
It really feels like most coaches come in and they've got their scripted first 15 plays, and you just march down the field and score. It really feels like Sirianni and his scripted plays is like, let's just try this random thing out, and it doesn't work, and then we just adjust to what does work. It's bizarre. Like, I mean, they ran an entirely different offense after the first quarter. In terms of the run concepts and what they were doing in the passing game, like, I mean, not like we were under center 13 personnel till we were going 5 wide, but I mean, there was a lot of subtleties, a lot of differences, just totally different scheme and way they were trying to attack the offense. And I don't know why he does that sometimes, but I guess you can't argue with the results.
Yeah, it's crazy. The whole Nick Sirianni experience. It's like the first 5 weeks of the season, he was throwing with Jalen Hurts like he was Peyton Manning, like 60 attempts a game. Not really, but it felt like it at times. And then now they adjusted to be a running team. I think he's trying to get to being a balanced in the middle team where they're not so dependent on the rush. And I think that's what we see early on in these games where it does seem like it's a little bit more pass heavy. And sometimes it doesn't work or whatever happens. This week, it was just a bad 4th down play call. I wouldn't have sent Jordan Howard out there when he clearly looked banged up. That's something we'll get into in terms of the running game. But if we get that 4th down, who knows what happens on that first drive? Maybe we score, and maybe that first half wouldn't be quite as painful. But it is something that they need to fix, and hopefully it's something that I don't know if it just means you start out by running the ball, but it's not that simple. It's easier to run the ball later in a game when a defense is tired. It's easier to run the ball later in the game when you have the threat of play action. I get that it's harder to run the ball right away, but I'd like to see a little bit more running the ball earlier on in games.
Yeah. On the defensive side of the ball, I was really impressed in this game by Josh Sweat. I thought he played a fantastic game. He got his contract extension, and he's a guy that a lot of people were hyped up about coming into the year, and he started slow. He had 3.5 sacks in his first 12 games, but he's had 4 sacks in his last 4 games. He's near the top of the league. I think I saw he was second only to Myles Garrett in pass rush win percentage. He's playing really well. Javon Hargrave he's not getting sacks anymore, but he's playing well. Fletcher Cox, you see the defensive line, I mean, kind of minus Derek Barnett, really coming together. And
hey, I'll take no dumb penalties out of Derek Barnett. That's all. We haven't gotten one in a while. I'll take it.
Yeah, the best game of Derek Barnett's career because I never heard his name.
Exactly. It's been a while since you really heard his name.
Yeah, that's true. Although you could argue the best game, my favorite thing that people always come at you with on Twitter when you criticize Barnett is he recovered a fumble that made him win the Super Bowl. And I'm like, go watch the play. He got pancaked. And then when Brandon Graham strip sacked Brady, the ball bounced right to him. He was already laying on the ground because he got pancaked. But that's all right. Just a couple more games and Barnett is out of here. For Washington, though, any Washington fans out there, it's got to be disheartening for them. They spent a first-round pick on Jamin Davis, the linebacker. And a lot of people thought that was a little bit of a reach, that he was more of a second-round guy. His snap counts have just continued to decrease as the season has gone along. He's really struggled. Obviously, they had no answer for Dallas Goedert. They haven't had answers for tight ends all year. And so, that does not look so far to have been a great pick for Washington in the first round.
Yeah, he was not a guy that I loved. He was kind of a guy that draft Twitter really fell in love with, coming like closer and closer to the draft. Where did he go again, Jamin Davis? To college?
It was Kentucky, I think.
Kentucky, yeah. He was a guy that a lot of SEC Twitter, a lot of draft Twitter was really, really going hard for. And, there was a lot of linebackers in the class that I thought were better prospects. The fact that Jamin Davis, and I think I said this on our draft show, the fact that he went above JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, was a joke.
It was crazy.
It's a joke. It's a complete joke. Imagine Washington's defense with fully healthy with Chase Young and Sweat and Allen and all those guys with JOK. That would be pretty scary.
Although I can tell you why that happened, and it always happens to guys like JOK that he's that hybrid, the linebacker, the safety. He can play slot corner. I mean, he can do all of that stuff. The problem with building your defense around a guy like that is if that guy gets hurt, you can't replace him. You almost have to have 2 of those. I mean, you think back to when the Eagles had Malcolm Jenkins a few years ago. If Malcolm Jenkins got hurt, you can't replace him with one guy. You've got to replace him with 3 different guys to fill those 3 different roles. So it always, I mean, that those Swiss Army knife guys, they do always tend to drop, it seems like, where you would think they would be more valuable because you almost need a backup to fill that same role if he gets hurt, which, Cleveland kind of double dipped there. They went and got, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a linebacker at West Virginia that I evaluated as a safety for the NFL. I can't remember the guy's name now, but basically the same type mold.
Holland?
No, I'll look it up while you
not
talk.
Holland is Oregon. West Virginia. Oh man. It's gonna kill me. It's gonna kill me that I can't get that off the top of my brain. I don't think Washington has done an excellent job in terms of nailing the fringe picks.
Fields.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is a weird guy because usually you see these slower safeties come to the league and convert to linebacker. He was a linebacker in college and he was kind of drafted as a safety for the NFL. But anyways, just random aside, I was thinking about that.
I did some NFL draft deep diving today. If you follow me on Twitter, you saw that. So I'm already looking ahead to the next draft. So I'm always down to look back at last draft now that we have some sample size to look at.
So, yeah. All right. You got anything else you want to say on this game?
I thought Avonte Maddox was awesome in this game. And he had that one drive where he had a garbage DPI called against him, in my opinion. That was just good defense. And he stepped up. I think he defended a pass. He broke up a pass. And then he had 2 great tackles, including one on 3rd down near the sideline where I think most of the players on our defense that tackle would have been broken. I believe it was by McLaurin too. So one of their better players and one of their, one of the harder players to tackle on their team. So
that PI, like usually you can go freeze frame, slow-mo, and you can be like, oh yeah, you could have called pass interference there. I legit watched that play a dozen times and I have no clue where they came up with pass interference on that one. And
yeah,
Washington on the day had 1 penalty for 4 yards. And they go from calling that ticky-tack nothing on Avonte Maddox to the very next drive. Hurts underthrows that ball to Reagor rolling out against pressure, and Reagor gets clotheslined by a guy with his back to the ball, which 100 times out of 100 is going to be DPI if Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady makes that throw. And no, I was livid. And I don't talk about officiating much, but the officiating in that game was atrocious.
Yeah, it definitely was not. It definitely was not very good. Officiating across the NFL and in college football this weekend was just terrible.
So we move on to week 18. The Eagles are guaranteed a playoff spot. How do you handle who plays? Obviously you can't sit everybody if you do want to sit starters. But if you're Nick Sirianni, are you playing your starters? Are you going to do a half? What's your approach this week?
Bench everybody. When you're as undermanned as we are in terms of going up against Green Bay's, the Tampa Bay's, the Dallas, and the LA Rams, we need every single player that we have on our team in terms of we cannot be risking anyone getting hurt. We need every piece. We need to play our best possible game to compete with these teams on the road in the playoffs. So I don't want to see a Lane Johnson get nicked up in week 18 or a Jason Kelsey or a Mailata or a Goddard, a Smith, a running back of importance, a Jalen Hurts, a Cox, a Hargrave, a Sweat. I'm listing pretty much everybody, but Slay, Maddox, Nelson, the safeties. Also,
you can play Barnett. That's
you
fine.
can play Barnett. Yeah, that's fine. I will say just a quick aside. We should mention Roddy McLeod. The pick he made at the end of the game. That wasn't even my quick aside, but the pick he made at the end of the game, is that the biggest play Roddy McLeod's made as an Eagle? I know he's been around here for some big moments and some big teams, but I can't think of one splash play that won a game or sealed the game or clinched the game like that did. And that obviously pretty much sealed us into the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, given the context that it A, sealed the game, and B, winning that game ended up clinching a playoff spot, I'd say that's definitely the biggest moment for Rodney McLeod as an Eagle.
Yeah, that was an awesome play. And just a quick troll, Jalen Reagor would not have caught that ball. If that's like an improv ball from Jalen Hurts and he launched that in the end zone and Jalen Reagor had to go that way, no chance Jalen's catching that in the end zone. Absolutely not. But then on the other side, Epps lays one big hit a game. I kind of like Epps. I think I don't know what the PFF grades are. I'd actually be really curious to see like what his PFF grade is this year, or what it's been week by week. But I feel like he makes a couple plays per game that I'm pretty impressed by, and I'm never like, oh, what was Epps doing there? So that's a pretty good sign for a guy that I wasn't expecting much out of this year. And there's been a lot of times this year where I've been like, yeah, there you go, Epps.
His PFF grade is a 72.8 this year.
Wow, that's pretty good.
It's 9 points higher than Rodney McLeod's. I mean,
wow.
Marcus Epps is what? Who's the safety from the Vikings that about paralyzed Devontae Maddox last year? I can't remember. I can't remember the dude's name, but the big hitter safety for the Vikings that can't cover anybody. That's basically Marcus Epps is a young version of that.
Are you talking about Harrison Smith?
Yeah.
Don't talk negatively about Harrison Smith.
He was trash the entire time he was an Eagle.
Wait, not Harrison Smith then. You're thinking of someone else.
It was the safety that hit Maddox in that game. I think it was the Packers game a couple years ago.
Oh, the Packers, not the Vikings.
It was a guy that came to us from the Vikings. I can't remember now.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll look that up later. We'll get a stat. We'll get a stat correction later on in the pod. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought Epps has been, I've been really impressed with him.
Yeah, he had one really big hit that I tweeted out this game, and it was clean. Like you see that hit a lot of times. Oh, Sendejo, that's who it was. Andrew Sendejo.
Oh, he's a bum.
That's what I was talking about. I knew Harrison Smith didn't sound right, but I knew. Yeah. Sendejo. He's a young version of Sendejo, except he's better. I mean, or at least he has been there. You don't want him to be your starting safety next year, but he's a good safety 3 to have in your back pocket.
Oh, he's a great safety 3. And if he is a starting safety, if they address everything else and you had to roll in with him, whatever.
Yeah.
He's better than Anthony Harris, I think. I don't even think it's close.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as for the resting starters, I'm with you. I don't think it's different if you're going into a bye. For the Packers, I think you've got to balance. We've got a bye, so if we don't play starters now, it's going to be 3 weeks without guys playing in live action. I think you've got to balance that and maybe play them a half or something. But for a team like the Eagles, you're not a bye. Really, your result on Sunday or Saturday is basically irrelevant. You're pretty much going to play the second place team in the NFC West, and so.
Did you watch the Manning cast on Monday Night Football?
I didn't.
So Goodell was interviewed by the Mannings, and Goodell was spreading propaganda about how, they really want to see every team go out there and play their players and play their starters. And he actually came at Peyton Manning. He's like, you guys on the Colts, you never won anything. And you always tried to rest at the end of the season, and momentum's a real thing. And look at Eli, they played the Patriots and barely lost, and then they won the title. So it was like a bunch of propaganda. And then Aaron Rodgers came on later. He's like, oh, I loved what the commissioner said. And they're going to have to, Matt LaFleur is going to have to really, it's going to be a hard sell making me not play. And it's like, yeah, I hope Nick Sirianni's not watching this, because I hope that they rest every single player.
The fact that Aaron Rodgers hasn't already had surgery on his toe is just absurd. Like, they were hoping for a bye so he could get the surgery and not miss a game. Then they clinched the bye. Like, he could have had an extra week. He could have had surgery on Monday and had, 2.5 weeks to recover from something he said he only needed a week for. Gross mismanagement, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it makes no sense. But yeah, no, I totally agree.
All right. Anything else you want to get out there from the Eagles-Washington game before we move on?
No.
All right, let's do it. So around the NFL, We had Carolina going to New Orleans and losing 10-18. Now, this was one of the two games that the Eagles just needed. They either needed Carolina to win or they needed the 49ers to win, and the 49ers came through where Carolina did not. And so Saints defense continued to keep their playoff hopes alive, although, I mean, we all know that playoff berth won't amount to anything. They don't have a quarterback. They only had one offensive lineman on Sunday, and they rushed for -4 yards in the first half. It's just a crazy stat. But Sam Darnold, not to be outdone, averaged 0 air yards per pass in the first 3 quarters, and he was sacked 7 times. And so New Orleans ends up winning this game. What'd you take away from this one?
So I actually wanted to pull up the scenario chart with the playoffs for this week, including New Orleans and San Fran. My takeaway from this game is that I'm pretty sure that if the LA Rams, if the Rams defeat the 49ers and the Saints win, it almost definitely means that the Rams will get to play the Saints. I want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn here. In most scenarios, in that scenario, it does seem that's the case. If you're the Rams, the difference between playing one of the Eagles, the 49ers, or playing the Saints, to me, is massive. I think the 49ers, honestly, are on a different level than the Eagles are. And then I think the Eagles are on a different level than the Saints are. And I think that gap between the Eagles and the Saints is probably even bigger than that gap than the Eagles to the 49ers. But the gap between playing the 49ers in the first round or playing the Saints in the first round is massive.
Playing the Saints is the closest thing to a first-round bye that you're going to get unless you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who definitely do not want to see the Saints in the playoffs.
Yeah, you're absolutely. They exercised those demons last year in the playoffs too. So they lost twice last year in the regular season to the Saints and then beat them in the playoffs. So I guess they could do the same again this year. But I definitely, it's like the Saints making the playoffs would be the spitting image to the Bears making the playoffs last year as the 7th seed.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, Minnesota at Green Bay. This was another big game. Green Bay needed to win for the Eagles to clinch, and obviously they did, 37-10. If you remember all the way back to week 1, the Packers lost 38-3 in the opener to the Saints, and we were all freaking out. And they've been nearly untouchable since. They're the 1 seed for the 2nd straight year, and they've never not had a bye under Matt LaFleur as a head coach. And so they head into week 18 with everything wrapped up. The question is, are you going to see Jordan Love under center? Now, aside from the rest for the playoff things, which they should absolutely do, there's no way Rodgers should be playing on a fractured toe in a meaningless game. The Packers should absolutely want to see Jordan Love out there for a week. I mean, Rodgers is likely gone next year, and so they should want to get Jordan Love reps here, regardless of what Aaron Rodgers wants.
Well, we saw the Jordan Love reps earlier on this year, and they were not promising. But yeah, Matt LaFleur just broke the record for coaching wins in the first 3 seasons at a stop. And what a lot of people are going to, and I even said this at first before I looked at the numbers. Well, you have Aaron Rodgers. So, it makes it a little bit easier. And that is true. It absolutely is true. You can't deny that. It's about 13 wins a year because he's at 39 wins already in his first 3 years with a chance to get to 40 next week. So he could add on to that record. I have a trivia question for you, Shane.
Okay.
The 49 games before that, what was their record?
The 49 games before LaFleur?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. 31-27.
24 and – or wait, did I do the bad math? No, wait, I did good math. 24-25.
Wow. 24-25 before.
So maybe LaFleur has not gotten enough credit. Maybe he deserves more credit.
Yeah, I mean, or we never dogged Mike McCarthy enough for how much he drugged that team down. I mean, just cutting him loose, let them rise up too. But you flip over to the Vikings side here, and they started Sean Mannion. How bad is Kellen Mond in practice? If the Vikings not only played Sean Mannion over him, but they played him even though he missed all week of practice because he was on the COVID list. Like, that doesn't bode well for a guy you spent a panic 3rd-round pick on. And I thought this was funny. The Vikings' second longest reception of the night. Do you know who made it?
Who?
The
KJ
center,
Osborne?
Garrett.
No.
No, their center, Garrett Bradbury, on a deflected pass was their second longest reception of the night. So the Vikings are going to Vikings. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback next year, because it's definitely not going to be Kirk Cousins, and I don't think it's going to be Kellen Mond either.
So I've got a fun game for you. I probably should have told you about this before we went on air, but the folks that are listening can hear us discuss it on air. I'm obsessed with the coaching carousel. I love the coaching carousel, but my favorite part's the interviews. We haven't quite gotten to that besides the Jacksonville Jaguars and hearing about who's interviewing where and all that stuff and all the rumors. I'm going to play a quick game with you called Keep or Fire, and you can give your answer on what you would do if you were those teams, if you were the GM or the owner, and what you think they will do.
Okay.
We can obviously the Jags and the Bears; those jobs are open. We can say that already. The Houston Texans, David Culley, they're 4-12. Are they firing David Culley? Are they keeping him? And what would you do?
Man, I would probably keep him. Dude hasn't had a chance. I mean, what he walked into was a complete dumpster fire. You can't get rid of him when the only player you had hasn't played all year. So I would keep him.
I agree. And you think they will?
I think so. I think they're in so much turmoil right now that you don't want to add that other thing on top. Like, who are you going to get? Who wants to go coach the Texans right now?
That's exactly what I said. So the Las Vegas Raiders. This is an interesting one. Rich Bisaccia, they have a play-in game to get to the playoffs this upcoming week against the Chargers. Does that earn him the real job after being the interim all year?
If they make the playoffs, I think they keep him.
Wow, it's a play. Not only is it a playoff game to make the playoffs, it's a playoff game for Rich Bisaccia to get the head coaching job.
I like it. High pressure.
Wow, I like that. That's high stakes. So then the Denver Broncos, I think this is a quick one. The Fang Man, Vic Fangio, it looks like he's gonzo, and I think we'd both get him out of there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially they got to get a quarterback, and do you really want a defensive head coach to get your core? I mean, if you want to hire a defensive head coach, you want to bring him in with an established quarterback, not with a rookie. So, yeah, he's got to go.
I said on a radio hit yesterday, I was talking about bets for next week, and I one last chance. I'm going to bet on the Chiefs pretty heavily. There's a quick little preview to our preview show. But I like the Chiefs against the Broncos on Saturday night, -9.5. Get those bets in as soon as possible, because I think those bets are going to go up. One last chance to bet against Drew Lock and Vic Fangio. And the funny part about that is, I don't know if Drew Lock ever quarterbacks another NFL game. I don't know if Vic Fangio he definitely probably never head coaches another NFL game. But the funny thing is, Vic Fangio is going to be telling his friends for years, like, man, if I would have had a quarterback instead of that loser Drew Lock, I would have been a great head coach. And Drew Lock is going to be telling his friends for years, like, man, if I had a head coach who knew what he was doing instead of that idiot Vic Fangio, like, I would have been Tom Brady.
It's all about the system you land in.
But the reality of it is Vic Fangio is probably an idiot and Drew Lock probably stinks. It's probably a combination.
So I used to, before I started doing a lot of draft evaluation stuff myself, I used to listen to a lot of Ben Solak, who's at The Ringer now. He was at the Draft Network, did Locked On NFL Draft with Trevor Sikkema. And I'll never forget one of the funniest lines I ever heard him do. They were talking about quarterbacks during the Drew Lock class, and Trevor brought up Drew Lock, and Ben said, the thing you need to understand about Drew Lock is he's bad. And that was it. And the co-host just started laughing, and people brought that up for years, but I about fell out of my chair laughing when I heard that. And it was so true. Drew Lock was just a bad quarterback. And I really don't understand how anybody ever thought different.
I've never understood either Missouri quarterback in the last 15 years that have went in the top 10. Can you name the other one?
No, I don't think so.
Blaine Gabbert.
Gabbert.
Blaine Gabbert is the number one quarterback of all time that when looking at that's like a long time ago. That's early, me being into the draft and really ranking guys. I remember thinking what are people thinking? What is everyone excited about this guy? This guy that looks like the Sunshine from Remember the Titans. Everyone loved Blaine Gabbert. I think he's still hanging around in the league. He might be in Tampa still. But he absolutely stunk. And, same thing with Drew Lock. Missouri quarterbacks, I'm done with them forever. If you're a high school quarterback recruiting somewhere, don't go to Missouri.
All right. Let's move on to another game here. We've got Atlanta traveling to Buffalo. They get beat 15-29. I think the takeaway from this game is maybe the Bills can run the ball now. They had 233 rushing yards, and they've struggled with that all year. Josh Allen struggled. He threw 3 picks, but the Bills scored 4 times on the ground, and they go on to win the game. Now, the Falcons had a shot at the playoffs in their first year with Arthur Smith. So a lot of people are excited about that. I saw some Falcons fans, there's a lot to build on here. But the reality, I think, is that Matt Ryan's not getting any younger, and they were 7-2 in one-possession games. And you are typically going to expect that to regress. So I think the Falcons overachieved this year. I do think they're going to take a step back next year. But I mentioned this on the preview show that Kyle Pitts was very close to breaking Mike Ditka's rookie tight end receiving record. And he ended up leaving this game with a hamstring injury. So I don't know if he's going to play week 18, but he only needs 59 yards to break that record. So something for people to keep an eye on.
He has the most fantasy points in the history of a rookie tight end. So that's what really matters. So I completely forgot that we were in the middle of my hire or fire game. So let's finish that out. I got distracted. We got in a conversation about Drew Lock and Missouri quarterbacks, but the Washington football team, Ron Rivera.
I'm going to keep him.
You're going to keep him? I'm keeping him too, just because another thing like that. Same thing with Houston.
There's a lot of problems in Washington.
Toxic.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems in Washington. Rivera is not high on the list.
And then our boy, Joe Judge from New York, Philadelphia's own Joe Judge.
Oh, hold on. I'm going to answer that in this next game.
Well, okay.
So skip him.
We'll wait on Joe Judge. And the guy who made me bring up this segment, Minnesota Vikings, Mike Zimmer. He's gone, right?
Yeah. Got to be gone.
He's got
to get a clean start there. New coach, new quarterback, start over.
Watch out for Nathaniel Hackett to get that Minnesota job. They're not only going to want to steal him from Green Bay, the offensive coordinator for Aaron Rodgers, but he's a lot like Stefanski. He's like a young offensive mind. They really like Stefanski. Apparently, they were upset to let him go because they thought he was going to be the head coach after Zimmer left. I could see that being Hackett. But Carolina Panthers, Matt Rule, keep him or fire him.
Gone. I would have fired him the minute he mentioned firing Joe Brady, and I would have made Joe Brady the head coach.
Same here. Do you think they'll do it, though? Do you think they'll have the guts to stick through a 5-year contract, paying him next 3 years while he's fired?
I don't think so. And here's what I would actually do if I'm Carolina. I would probably keep him one more year because you're already tied to Darnold anyways, and he already made that bed. You can let him lie in it and see if he can turn it around, and then you can cut both of them loose the year after that. So I don't know that you're going to have people chomping at the bit to come in knowing that they're going to be saddled with Sam Darnold as their quarterback.
They're not going to do that, though. It's going to be dead money. There's no way they can go into next year with Sam Darnold. They're going to have to draft someone or do something. Yeah,
it's a bad draft to need to do that.
Well, there is still 5 guys that are going to go in the top 40 picks, so it's not crazy. I think they'll figure out a way to draft someone, or they'll trade something for someone. The funny thing is, they traded a lot of their draft capital to go in on guys this year. They traded for Stephon Gilmore. They traded for another guy that I'm forgetting. I think another secondary guy, I believe, that they traded for. But yeah, the Panthers, I don't think that they'll fire Matt Rule either, but they absolutely should. Then last but not least.
It's too bad they drafted J.C. Horn instead of Justin Fields.
That was so dumb. People are going to kill the Falcons for taking Pitts, and people are going to kill us for taking Smith maybe, and people are going to kill a lot of teams for not taking QBs. People are going to kill the Broncos for not taking Surtain. Yeah, but Surtain's really good. J.C. Horn got hurt. We don't know how good he is yet.
Right. But that's results based. I'm talking process.
That's true.
They both needed a quarterback, and there was one. Anyways, move on. Who's your last one here?
Seattle.
Carroll's gone.
Yeah, he's absolutely gone.
I would get rid of Carroll and try to sell Russell Wilson on staying with a new coach. That'd be my game plan for the offseason.
Yeah, just let him hire him.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do. I would tell, we know the bridge, there's hard feelings here. We're going to get rid of him. Be a part of this interview process. Who do you want to play under?
Bieniemy? Like, do you want to hire Bieniemy? Do you want, like, I feel like that would Russ. I feel like Russ is very in tune with NFL Twitter, and I feel like that would be like the very popular thing to do because everyone loves to talk about Bieniemy not getting jobs. Like, I think Bieniemy makes a lot of sense. You know who else makes a lot of sense to Seattle? A homegrown guy from that area, from the Pacific Northwest, from Washington, former Eagles head coach, Super Bowl champion, Doug Peterson, who's from that area, could make a lot of sense for the Seahawks. And maybe you sell Russell Wilson. You're like, hey, this guy's a nice guy. He likes ice cream. He has a Super Bowl
sweater
ring.
Vests.
Yeah. I think Doug Peterson and Russ could get along.
There is not a single opening that you can ask me if Doug Peterson is a good fit for that I will say no. Like, I literally love him. I love him to Las Vegas. I love him to Jacksonville. I love him to Seattle.
Keep him away. Keep him away from Chicago. No, I don't want him in Chicago. And I have a spot for you. The New York Giants.
No.
Yeah.
I'll say no. I'll say no, but it's not because I don't think he could do it. It's because I don't want him to.
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't it be funny if the Eagles only hired Doug Peterson because Ben McAdoo turned them down and went to New York? And then the Eagles fired Doug Peterson, and then he ended up in New York being a pain and a thorn in their side for the next decade.
I would absolutely hate to see Doug go to New York. That would kill me.
So let's get on to the Giants game here and let me answer the Joe Judge question.
Perfect segue. Perfect.
The Giants go to Chicago and they lose 29-3. And the Giants set an NFL record in this game with -10 net passing yards for the day. Mike Glennon had 2 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles and threw for -10 yards. He had an EPA of -31.4. Just by being on the field, he lost 31.4 expected points for the Giants, despite only throwing 11 passes. Just hilarious levels of ineptitude. So after the game, I don't know, did you see the Joe Judge rant after the game?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so Joe Judge gets asked why fans should continue to have faith in the Giants to turn things around, and he goes on an 11-minute long rant, and I honestly thought about reading all of it and responding to it, but I decided it would take too long. So I just pulled some of my favorite quotes. So here we go. He said, in 2018, I was part of a team who halfway through the season, we were all pretty convinced we were going to get fired. We didn't think we were going to make the playoffs, had no concept of anything that was coming. We just knew we were going to keep showing up and improving week after week. And on the outside, we were all terrible. We didn't care about any of that noise on the outside. We didn't care about it at all. What did we care about on the inside? What were guys doing? Guys showed up, they worked, they fought, they worked. We improved enough as a team, put things together, made a run, and ended up winning the championship. Do you know who Joe Judge coached for in 2018?
The Patriots.
The New England Patriots. You know what their record was halfway through the season when he's talking about?
What?
They were 7-2. They were 7-2, and he's talking about they all thought they were going to get fired and they were terrible, and then they pulled it together and won a championship.
Yeah, Bill Belichick was on the hot seat.
Yeah. So then we move on. And later on, he said, this ain't a team that's having fist fights on the sidelines. Shout out to Washington football team.
Who won the division over you last year, Joe Judge? Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Don't forget that you whined about that at 6-10.
This ain't some clown show organization or something else, okay? We're talking about the foundation being built. Is it just me? Does nobody else remember the fight they had in training camp that Daniel Jones was involved in, that they spent all day running and then half their team retired? Also, okay, go ahead.
They have the worst record in football over the last 5 years.
Yeah. We're talking about the foundation. And then he goes on to think about the foundation. You know, if I hired a guy to build a house for me and 2 years later he was still talking about the foundation, I would hire him, or I would fire him and hire someone that would build the actual house. But we move on. And he said, I can tell you, we've got more players here who are going to be free agents next year. All right. They're coming in my office every day begging me to come back. So these guys are flying from the team they play for to New York in the middle of the week to beg Joe Judge to come back, apparently. I know players that we coached last year are still calling me twice a week telling me how much they wish they were here, even though they're getting paid more somewhere else. Because, NFL players are well known for wanting to play for losing organizations for less money. By the way, if this is true, that sounds like tampering to me, but we'll let that lie because that's a lie. And then my favorite one here at the end. He said, a few years ago, before I came here, when I came here and sat down with all the players, I wanted to know what it was like in here, what we had to change. I wanted to hear it from their mouths, all right? To a man, every player looked me in the eye and said, Joe, it's not a team. They don't play hard. We're out of the playoff. When we're out of the playoffs, everybody quit. Okay? So he's throwing, the previous coach under the bus, which is total crap. That team that he's talking about was 2-11, and they won 2 of their last 3 games. This team that quit because they were out of the playoffs won 2 of their last 3 games. You know how many times Joe Judge has won 2 out of 3 games in his career?
0.
Twice. He's done it twice, but still. He's delusional, man. And to be honest, they came out and said that they were going to build around him. I have got to wonder if they're having second thoughts about that after his rant. He entered that rant safe. They should have fired him anyways. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if nothing comes down the pipe later on that they might move on from him. And I really hope they don't, because as another NFC East team fan, I would love for Joe Judge to be in New York for his life.
You said it all. I don't have anything to add to that. Everything I would have added, you added.
All right. So let's move on here. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Chiefs lose this one 31-34. This is kind of a crazy ending to the game here. It was tied at 31. There's 58 seconds left, and there's a 4th and goal from the 1. Cincinnati decides to go for it, but they get stopped. But there are offsetting penalties, so you repeat the down. When they did it again, they went for it again. Incomplete pass, but there was a defensive penalty, which gave a first down. So Kansas City at that point had no timeout, so Cincinnati knelt it out, and then they kicked a field goal to win.
Well,
which is kind of brilliant. Huh?
Well, part of the reason they knelt it out was because Joe Burrow got hurt on that play where they went for it and there was a defensive penalty. I don't know if there's been any update on that. He seemed fine dancing in the locker room after getting the doing the LSU dance with Jamar Chase, smoking cigars once again, like he was when they won the national title. But he got hurt in that moment. And then I don't think that they were going to trust Brandon Allen to do anything other than just kneel it down. But that was absolutely the correct move.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to give the ball back to the Chiefs, but if you are going to give it back to the Chiefs, giving it to them with 50 seconds left and no timeouts on the 1-yard line seems pretty safe, comparatively speaking. Jamar Chase goes off in this game, 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chase looks amazing. I think he's proved. I remember the whole thing in the early season about the drops and his comment about the footballs, and we were all up in arms about that. And he's just dominated down the stretch here.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable. And in that game, you saw just everything that he can do, going up and getting balls, breakaway speed, beating you on deep balls, taking a slant to the house. He did whatever. That Bengals offense is electrifying. Joe Burrow and him. To everyone that was critical of the Bengals for not taking an offensive lineman instead of Jamar Chase, sometimes you just got to take someone who completely transforms that position. Like Jamar Chase is what Justin Jefferson was, maybe even better. And the fact that he has Joe Burrow and has the continuity from college, it really has transformed Joe Burrow.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Miami travels to Tennessee. They get smoked 34-3. The Titans sacked Tua 4 times. They pressured him constantly. Tua goes 18 for 38 for 205 yards with an interception. And honestly, he had 3 others that should have been picks. He had 3 fumbles. The Titans D is really clicking. And if Derrick Henry comes back, this might be a team that nobody wants to face in the playoffs.
Yeah, the fact that they're going to be the 1 seed, they might be the most improbable 1 seed of all time. I don't know if you can ever remember a 1 seed being so, not irrelevant. That's not the right word, but I don't have the right word. It's not jumping out in my brain. But the fact that this team, after the Derrick Henry injury, and the fact that this team with Ryan Tannehill at QB and with Julio Jones not making the impact that they thought he would upon bringing him in, it really is interesting that the Titans have been able to do that. And it's not like they have a top 5 defense either. I think that Mike Vrabel is absolutely the coach of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, with all the things that they've had to go through, them losing Derrick Henry, we talked about when they lost him in terms of EPA, that's like most teams losing their quarterback. And so it hasn't been pretty on offense, but you wouldn't expect it to be when that important of a player goes down. But they found ways to continue to win. Back-to-back AFC South champs, they're the 1 seed. It's just impressive what they've been able to string together.
It really is.
All right. Oh, and on the Tua thing, I know you were a Tua guy. What's your thought on Tua moving forward? Do you think, what does Miami do here with him?
That was a rough game. I think that you have to give him a chance again next year, but I know that there's a lot of people that are going to disagree with that and say, let's just move on. I think you saw enough good in that winning streak to be excited about next year and to put some pieces around him and to build up on that defense. But who knows, with the limited faith that they had in him, a game like yesterday might have been the nail on the coffin.
I don't think Tua is the answer for Miami, but they've got such big needs at playmaker and at offensive line. It does make it a little tricky to evaluate. I definitely wouldn't want to throw a rookie quarterback behind that offensive line. So I think they've got to build that up a little bit at least. And, maybe Tua shows something next year.
Credit to John Jansen of Fox Sports The Gambler, who had me on his Eagles post-game show on Sunday from 4 to 7. He actually floated the idea of Tua going to New Orleans and Sean Payton getting his hands on the guy that a lot of people compared to Drew Brees. And he's not Drew Brees, but we think if he's going to be able to reach any sort of potential that he had, Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints would probably be the most ideal spot for Tua to do that. The funny thing about that is he goes from a spot in Miami where they have a lot of weapons in Miami. Maybe they don't have the belief in him as an organization. Maybe they don't have the best coaching staff offensively. Maybe they don't have the best offensive line. Maybe they don't have a perfect defense, but they have weapons. And then in New Orleans, it's the opposite. They have everything else that you'd want. They have the defense, they have the coaching staff, they have the foundation, the structure, but they don't have the weapons, especially since we don't think Michael Thomas will be there. But maybe that's something that they can fix in the offseason.
Yeah. Shout out to a Twitter user, Fade to Black. He was in the comments giving me Andrew Sendejo's name. And for some reason, it didn't pop up on our comment feed here.
Yeah, StreamYard's broken.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out what's going on there. So shout out to you. I've been talking about how much we love to interact with our users, and I would love to have thrown that up on the screen when you said it, but for some reason it didn't pop up over here on our comments. So I apologize about that, but definitely appreciate that, and we'll try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, keep leaving comments. We see them after the fact, but sometimes StreamYard stinks.
Yeah, YouTube, I will say YouTube comments always seem to come in. So if you are watching on Twitter, if you do want to bounce over to YouTube, not trying to chase you off of Twitter, feel free to stay there. But YouTube comments do seem to always show up. So there's a better chance those will pop up here. So anyways, moving on, we're going to have to burn through some games here. We got the Raiders beating the Colts 23-20. So now the Colts road to the playoff runs through Jacksonville. Do you know when the last time the Colts won a game in Jacksonville was?
I was a freshman in college in 2014. I heard that stat today. That is absolutely crazy. Is that pre-Blake Bortles?
I think so. Yeah,
I think so too. That's a long time ago. Pre-Blake Bortles world.
So Eagles fans can cross their fingers and hope that the Jags can pull it off again, because then not only would the Dolphins pick not be a playoff pick, neither would the Colts pick. And so that would be great news for Eagles fans.
By the way, Carson Wentz was 1 for 9 for 7 yards in this game at one point, so that was nice. And he threw a terrible pick also at another point in this game. But the Eagles fans should be rooting for the Dolphins to lose to the Patriots, for the Colts to lose to the Jaguars, and for the Eagles to lose to the Cowboys. We didn't get into maybe we'll talk more about this on the preview show in terms of who we would prefer to face as Eagles fans. There is one scenario that I personally want to avoid Tampa. I'd rather play the Rams. So there is one scenario where us losing is beneficial to that. So not only for the pick purposes will I be rooting for Dallas to beat us, but also for the chance to play the Rams instead of the Bucs. But yeah, Eagles fans should be rooting against the Colts, Dolphins, and us this week if you're concerned with the pick.
All right. Yeah, we'll get into some of that on the preview show and definitely into the prospective matchups. Up next, Jacksonville got trounced by New England. Nothing really to talk about there. Trevor Lawrence got picked 3 times. Mac Jones looked like he got back on track, but it was against the Jags, so it doesn't count. Tampa Bay traveled to the Jets for one of the most interesting games of the year. They win 28-24, but everybody knows the most interesting thing was the Antonio Brown fiasco. And so I just want to revisit briefly the timeline of Antonio Brown. So
yeah, let me just say before you get into this, I was explaining this to my girlfriend the other day. Like, since he has signed with the Raiders to now, and I was forgetting how many things had happened in between. I was like, oh yeah. And there was the foot thing where he burned it on the Creo chain. Like, there's so many things where it's like, oh my God.
So when he got cut by the Raiders, they asked Bruce Arians about it, and Bruce Arians said, quote, "We're not going to sign him." And then they signed him. And then Bruce Arians was asked about him after he was already there, and he said he's been a model citizen. And then like a week later, we found out he forged a COVID card. And then after the whole thing at the game where he takes his pads off, he throws them into the stands, he leaves the field shirtless and he catches an Uber out of there. He comes to the podium afterwards and he says he's no longer a Buck. No offense, Bruce, but I'm pretty sure Antonio Brown told us that a couple hours before you did. Like, that's like the whole "you can't quit because you're fired" line. Like, Antonio Brown quit. He already announced in front of a live audience, "I'm done." And then Bruce Arians comes out and he's like, "Yeah, we cut him," which, spoiler alert, isn't even true. He still hasn't showed up on waivers. I don't know if you saw that, but
yeah,
I think it was Ian.
I wonder if that's something, they're trying to get out of some contract stuff, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I don't know on that, but just bizarre. And I mean, you reap what you sow. They deserved it. That guy should have never got another chance. He should have never been back on the field after faking a COVID card to begin with. And so no sympathy there for the Bucs or for Bucs fans over that one.
But do you know why he got back on the field, and you know why he got a chance with Tampa?
Because Brady vouched for him. Beyond
that, why did Brady vouch for him?
Why?
Because he's really damn good still.
That's true. Okay.
That's the takeaway from Antonio Brown. And you know what the Bucs record is this year in games that Antonio Brown played in?
I pulled this stat a few weeks ago in one of our shows, but it's night and day difference when he plays and doesn't.
If you include the Jets game that he left when they were down 24-10, so it shouldn't count, but I'm going to include it for this purpose since they did win. They're 7-0 in games that Antonio Brown played in this year. And they did win the Super Bowl last year. And I think that they brought him in when they were 7-5, and then they won 5 straight games after he signed. I could be wrong on when they brought him in last year. I can't quite remember when he started playing, or there might have been some suspension. I can't remember the timeline last year with Antonio Brown. So much has happened now. But their record with him last year was fantastic because they went on a run at the end of the season, and then they obviously went on a run in the playoffs, wild card round, division round, conference championship, Super Bowl, winning 4 games with Antonio Brown being an important piece. So everyone's clowning the Browns, and everyone's saying like, "Oh, you should have seen this coming," and you wasted your time with Antonio Brown. Well, they didn't really waste their time with Antonio Brown. They won a Super Bowl. So that's kind of what I'd have to say. I think if you got Bruce Arians and Tom Brady on some truth serum, they like a year and a half ago, and you said, "Hey, you're going to sign Antonio Brown. We're going to go on a run to the Super Bowl, and then next year we're going to be 12-4, about to go into the playoffs, and then Antonio Brown's going to have a freak out, and you're going to have to cut him." Are you happy with that? I think they'd be like, "All right, yeah, we'll do it."
Yeah, for sure. Good news for the Jets is Zach Wilson just completed his 4th straight game without an interception. So Zach Wilson's looking a little better. The bad news for the Jets is Robert Saleh has no idea what he's doing. So they blow a 14-point lead. But what I want to talk is there's 2:17 left in the game, and they've got a 4th and 2 from the 7-yard line. They're up 4. So a field goal puts them up 7. Now, they decide to go for it, which I can totally get on board with. You go for it, you score, the game's basically over. If you don't, you've got them pinned deep and you're still up 4. But on 4th and 2, they called a QB sneak. Like, I don't know what the numbers are for a QB sneak on 4th and 2. I know they're great on 4th and 1, but that just seems like a ridiculous call. And obviously it didn't work, and Tampa ends up winning the game. So shoddy end of game management there from Robert Saleh.
Did you hear the whole back and forth about this?
I did not.
So it came out after the game that was supposed to be an end around to Braxton Berrios, where I guess in the normal situation in game, that's supposed to be like a 4th and 1, 4th and inches end around. But Zach Wilson has an option to check into a QB sneak. But something happened in the miscommunication between Mike LaFleur and Zach Wilson, where Zach Wilson thought it was a QB sneak, where he had the option to check it in to a Braxton Berrios end around. And Zach Wilson went out and did it. And then Robert Saleh, I guess, was screaming at Mike LaFleur on the sideline, and Robert Saleh like absolutely tore into Mike LaFleur in the postgame without mentioning his name. So there's a lot of drama there. But the funny thing about that is a lot of smart NFL people are saying that Mike LaFleur has been one of the best coordinators in football this year, and some of the things that he's been able to draw up for the Jets with limited talent, and some of the games that he's had without Zach Wilson. And we've talked about the success that a lot of their backups have had. I mean, he made Mike White look pretty good. Josh Johnson looked good for a game. Joe Flacco had a pretty good game or two. So a lot of people think Mike LaFleur is a really good coach. So a lot of people are like, wow, this Robert Saleh guy's like freaking out at Mike LaFleur for, a mess up, when Mike LaFleur is kind of the only reason that they're not a complete train wreck, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of a Matt Rule, Joe Brady situation, I guess, brewing maybe.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on here. We got about 5 games left. The Rams and the Ravens. The Rams win this one 20-19. Matthew Stafford had 3 turnovers in this game for the second week in a row. And again, the Rams overcame. And I've got a question for you. Would you rather start Jalen Hurts or Matthew Stafford in a playoff game?
Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think that's easy. I think it's easy. Like, Matthew Stafford has been awful down the stretch. And I mean, I know that you hope we face up with the Rams. I do as well. I'd take the Cardinals too, because I don't think I kind of think they're floundering too. But you definitely want to match up with the NFC West, in my opinion. Cooper Kupp became the 4th player in NFL history with 100 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 15 touchdowns in a season. So do you know who the other 3 are? Who are the other 3 receivers that have done that?
I don't, but I would put Cooper Kupp number 3 on my MVP ballot. I have Brady 1, Rodgers 2, Kupp 3, Mahomes 4, Jonathan Taylor 5. That would be my MVP ballot.
Jonathan Taylor all the way.
Is he 1 for you still?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I think the MVP is a joke anyways. In the Pro Bowl, I never get too much into that stuff. The other 3 receivers are Randy Moss, Marvin Harrison, and Jerry Rice. By the way.
Good. Pretty good
company. Yeah. So in week 13, the Ravens had a 91% chance of making the playoffs, and now they are virtually eliminated after failing to score an offensive touchdown in a game for the first time in 3 years.
I don't want to forget to say this because you mentioned Marvin Harrison's name. Marvin Harrison's son is on Ohio State in one of the first games that he got a lot of time to play since Olave and Wilson opted out for the NFL draft. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 3 touchdowns in the first half of the Rose Bowl for Ohio State. So we will be looking at in a couple of years when we're studying for the NFL draft, Shane, we'll be analyzing Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yes, absolutely. We've got Steven on YouTube chiming in here. He says Stafford isn't exactly a playoff veteran. Would be interesting to see what he does. That's true. Hasn't seen a lot of playoff games. Has never won a playoff game. And so, he's got a couple losses that Hurts doesn't have, but I would definitely rather have Jalen Hurts as a 1-game starter in the playoffs.
Matt Stafford is addicted to throwing pick sixes. He's thrown 4 this year, and if you watch all 4, none of them are like, oh, that's not his fault. Oh, that hit off a receiver's hands. It's like, no, those are all throws inside the 25 that are way too risky to be making. And Matt Stafford's 0-3 in the playoffs. Hasn't been there in like 5-6 years. So I expect a rough playoff performance out of Matthew Stafford. And he said Ohio State's wide receiver position's completely stacked. Yeah, they have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson going to the draft this year. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be a first round pick. Next year, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a first round pick either next year or in 2 years. And Jameson Williams was at Ohio State, transferred to Alabama, and now he's going to be the first receiver drafted in the NFL draft this year from Alabama. Just pretty crazy stuff.
Brandon chiming in says Harrison Jr. is also a former St. Joe's prep standout, where Jeremiah Trotter's son Josiah plays for now and committed to Clemson after next year. So cool connections there.
I did know that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a Philly guy. His dad is a scary Philly guy. And then I did know Jeremiah Trotter's son was committed to Clemson. I didn't know he played in prep.
All right, let's roll on here. Denver at the Chargers. The Chargers win 34-13. Chargers versus Raiders is for a playoff berth now. In this game, Herbert set a single-season franchise record for 35 touchdown passes, which broke Phillip Rivers' mark. So I thought that was interesting. And that's all I've got on that one.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine how nerdy Justin Herbert would look smoking a cigar, doing the get the gat dance. Like I don't think he could pull it off. So Joe Burrow greater than Justin Herbert.
He wouldn't have time to smoke the cigar. He'd already be in the film room.
How great! I really hope Bengals Chargers face off in the playoffs. I don't really even know. I haven't looked at the AFC possibilities. That'd be fun for this podcast. We'd have to do some sort of bet for the podcast. That'd be funny.
Definitely. All right. Houston at San Francisco. San Francisco wins 23-7. Trey Lance struggled early. He had a good second half, though. He finishes 16 of 23 for 249, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So the question now is, are they going to go back to Jimmy G? I mean, I think they probably do, because Lance doesn't have the experience that he should have been getting all season long. Like, you're in a win and you're in situation. I mean, you got to go with the guy with experience. It's just too bad the guy they traded up for doesn't have more than 2 starts under his belt.
I'd go with Trey Lance. I didn't think he looked great. I didn't think he was perfect, but I thought he made enough plays. I know it was against the Texans, and I think that when you have guys like Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and guys to lean on, I think they should go with Lance. I don't think the 49ers have much of a chance to do much beyond winning a game anyway. So why not try to throw a look at teams that teams don't have? Trey Lance is not a guy that you have a ton of film on. So unless you're Kyle Shanahan and you think in your heart of hearts that Jimmy G can make that team a Super Bowl team this year, which I don't necessarily buy into, I think you should go with Trey Lance at this point, because I think that we've seen now that the gap isn't huge, and you always have maybe you make Jimmy G active and you have him ready to play, but I think Trey Lance should absolutely be the starter. And hold on, the comment above that, he said, I'm a Michigan fan, but wouldn't mind Chris Olave on the Birds. And earlier he said we need to get Jordan Davis. If you're a Michigan fan, you should be talking about David Ojabo. David Ojabo is a name that I would definitely be interested in for the Eagles. But yeah, Jimmy is still seeing that wide open Super Bowl overthrow in his nightmares. Yeah, Kyle Shanahan, I don't know if you saw the viral video with him tossing the football around when he was drinking this summer, and he threw it from one house from a roof to 3 houses down. And it was Kyle Shanahan thinks he's man, if I could have just been playing quarterback, I'd be a Super Bowl champion. I could have made that throw.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, 3 games left. Arizona at Dallas. Arizona wins 25-22. After 3 straight losses, they're showing some signs of life. They hold Dallas to 22. The offense isn't where you'd want it to be, but it's progress, at least. It gives them a little bit of hope going into the playoffs here. Meanwhile, Dallas drops from the 2 seed to the 4 seed, and they could face the Cardinals in the wild card round again. It's probably going to be the Cardinals or the Rams, and we'll get into that on the preview show, but it looks like the NFC West winner will play Dallas and the loser will play the Eagles. Dak,
the opposite.
Or the winner. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Dak, is interesting thing from this game. Dak had 5 passes batted down at the line of scrimmage. I don't know if I haven't seen that happen. I mean, you would expect that to happen with maybe a short guy like Kyler or Russell Wilson or something, but you just don't see that very often. I thought that was kind of strange. He had these weird inaccuracies throughout the game. He was kind of scattershot, and he had a fumble. So not the best Dak game. I mean, he threw 3 touchdowns, but the Cowboys, I think McCarthy said they're going to play their starters, or did I make that up in my head? I can't remember.
I think he did say that. I know Tampa said the same thing.
So, you got to know they're probably, I don't know that they do if they win that game, but they're probably not feeling good about where they're at right now headed into the playoffs.
And the Rams will be playing their starters. So it looks like everyone, besides maybe
except the Eagles.
Green Bay and the Eagles. It looks like everyone will be playing their starters.
All right, moving on. Detroit at Seattle. Not a lot to say about this game. Seattle wins 51-29, but I do want to point out 2 things. This is the first time Seattle has topped 50 since Wilson's rookie year in 2012. So if this is his last game in Seattle, which he said he hoped it wasn't, he threw a pretty good going out party. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown had 8 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown, and he added a rushing touchdown to become the first Lions receiver with a rushing touchdown since Calvin Johnson. And he tied Calvin Johnson's streak of 5 straight 8 reception games. So he could break Calvin Johnson's streak if he were to get 8 receptions in week 18.
Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a revelation this year. He's been absolutely awesome for Detroit. And just a crazy trade that I heard. Bill Simmons, I'm not a huge fan of his, but I listened to his One Gambling Guess the Lines pod, and he suggested a Russell Wilson trade that I thought was patently ridiculous. He suggested Russell Wilson to the Raiders for Derek Carr, 2 1s and a 2. And let me just say real quick that Derek Carr has been better than Russell Wilson this year. Flat out. Seattle has a better offensive line, better weapons, a better coaching staff, and a better defense than the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders are 4 wins better fighting for the playoffs, or 3 wins better fighting for the playoffs, while the Seahawks are 6-9, about to go home. If you switched Russell Wilson and Derek Carr and the Seahawks and the Raiders, I don't think that the Raiders are any better, and I don't think that the Seahawks are any worse. So the fact that the Raiders would be throwing in 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick into that trade, I thought was one of the more absurd trade proposals I've heard, and just completely disrespectful to Derek Carr.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do that at all. I am really interested to see how the QB carousel plays out this year, though, with guys like Carr and Cousins and Russell Wilson, and I mean, even to an extent, Deshaun Watson, Jimmy G. And we're about to get into Baker. So Cleveland loses to Pittsburgh 14-26. Big Ben got a win in what is likely his final home game, attempting 46 passes for 123 yards. I talked about the Eagles running backs averaging 2.7 yards per carry. Big Ben averaged less yards per attempt than Eagles running backs did on Sunday. So just horrible. But that's not the quarterback I want to talk about. So I just want to list some things for you here. NFL starters this season include Jake Fromm, Mike Glennon, Andy Dalton, Sean Mannion, Davis Mills, Ian Book, your guy, Garrett Gilbert. Baker Mayfield is the only quarterback who has thrown 10 straight incompletions in a game this year out of all of those guys. And now they said they are shutting him down. He's going to have the surgery. And Cleveland, hopefully for Cleveland fans' sake, have dodged a huge bullet, and they're going to let this guy walk, or at least tag him and not pay him mega money. But on the Pittsburgh side, TJ Watt had 4 sacks in this game. And so he is now 1 away from tying Michael Strahan's single season record, despite the fact that he missed 2 games this season.
Yeah, all I'll say about Pittsburgh is you put Aaron Rodgers on the Steelers next year and they're going to win the Super Bowl. Same with Russell Wilson, probably. And if you put Kenny Pickett on the Steelers next year, they're a sneaky contender, even if Pickett isn't that great. I just think you get an NFL quarterback on that roster. I think the Steelers are a contender.
Yeah. Brandon says on YouTube, people underrate Derek Carr. Correct me if I'm wrong, but thought I heard this year that Carr leads all active quarterbacks in the last 3 years in fourth quarter comebacks. I'd take Carr over Wilson this year. I know he's led a lot of them. I also know he only needed to lead a fourth quarter comeback this week because he threw 2 brutal picks in that game. So, sometimes he's kind of the guy. He's like the arsonist that sets the fire so he can put it out sometimes, I feel like. Yeah. But he's the first responder that you're a little bit wary of. But I agree. I think Carr is underrated. as Brandon said, you got to admire Baker's guts for playing this year. No one can say the guy isn't tough. He isn't great, but I think he's better than most. And I don't think he's as bad as he's looked this year, obviously playing with the torn labrum. It's one of the things where Cleveland should have just stepped in. Like, that decision looks worse and worse as their playoff hopes just cratered. They should not have had him out there. And no player except Antonio Brown apparently is going to tell you they shouldn't play when you want him out there. And so to a degree, there's got to be the responsible adult in the room that tells them, hey, we're shutting this down because you need to not be out there anymore. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting the team. And that just didn't happen. And that's questionable. And it makes me a little concerned about Stefanski. But I don't know. I don't know what you make of Baker. He definitely hurt himself financially by playing out the end of this year.
Absolutely. And I keep saying the Browns did themselves a favor by not having a good year this year and finding out that Baker wasn't the guy.
Yeah. All right. That's about going to wrap it up for our Week 17 review show. Mark, you got any final thoughts you want to throw out here?
Yeah, I've been doing, a ton of draft research today. So I'll just kind of say, I think that the Eagles' top 5 needs in no order are receiver, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, and cornerback probably. And there are options at each of those positions. With receiver, you're going to have guys like Jamison Williams, Drake London, David Bell, the Ohio State receivers I mentioned earlier. At corner, you're going to have guys like Sauce Gardner, Kyer Elam, Roger McCreary, Andrew Booth. At linebacker, a lot of people joke about how the Eagles never draft a linebacker. Well, they're going to have to stare down two in the face this year in the teens and 20s. It was Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean. And then at the end, we have David Ojabo, who we talked about earlier. And we also have maybe George Karlaftis falls, maybe a DeMarvin Leal falls. And then there's a ton of offensive linemen as well. So every position that the Eagles need, there are players that fill that will probably be available at one of their 3 slots in the first round. So it is very exciting going into a draft that seems very rich in talent with 3 first-round picks.
Yeah. Steven's a big Devin Lloyd fan, said you could turn him into a strong safety, could become a chancellor. He's really athletic. I'd rather just take him and leave him at linebacker, though. The Eagles desperately need a playmaker there.
I think he's Darius Leonard. I think there's a lot of Darius Leonard in his game.
Yeah, which would be huge for the Jonathan Gannon scheme, assuming he's still around. But all right, well, that's going to about do it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining us for episode number 35 of Chalk Talk. Shout out to Steven and Brandon in the YouTube comments and Fade to Black on Twitter. We appreciate you guys stopping by and interacting with us on the show. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Share it with a friend. It really helps us out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.